Hello, everyone, and welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Podcast. I'm your host, Greg Ambrosius, and I'm here with Shawn Childs, NFBC Hall of Famer, who first joined the NFBC in our first year, 2004, plus the NFFC in 2004. He's been with us all the way through 18 straight years. Shawn, how you doing today?
I'm all right. I was a little concerned you wanted me to do this, with the Hall of Fame voting in baseball, nobody making it. I thought maybe you were going to say, hey, well, we need to recount your resume. Every year you're lowering the bar a little bit, but here we are.
Once you're in, you can't get kicked out no matter what, unless you do something really bad off the field here. So I know you're bowling tonight. So are we bowling right-handed or left-handed tonight?
Actually, tonight is not a bowling night.
Oh.
Friday night's left-handed, Monday night's right-handed. Been a little slump right-handed, but my lefty's coming around, but I just wish I had a little more time to practice.
So tell everyone, are you one of the only people in the world to bowl a perfect game right-handed and left-handed?
No, I'm sure there are people have done it, but I have not at this time bowled a perfect game left-handed. I shot 299 in practice,
Oh,
280 is the highest in league. I shot 784 lefty, and believe it or not, my high series right-handed was in 1984, 788. So you would think the ball's gonna be easier that I would
yeah.
break that, but I haven't strung the things together, and I really don't put enough time in at least bowling league games and stuff like that to have a shot at it. But it will come sooner or later.
Right-handed and left-handed bowling, averaging over what, 210 are you on both?
Yeah, and but
Ah,
but
yeah.
what's 210 these days? It's probably 190 like 20 years ago. I averaged 217 in 1984. That was good. Nobody else
Yeah.
averaged like 185.
On wood lanes, yeah, not the synthetic that you just put in the same spot all the time nowadays. So, all right, enough of bowling. So, you are a charter member, like I said, of the NFBC and NFFC. So about 18 years ago at this time, you saw an ad in a magazine, I assume, saw a $100,000 grand prize. You didn't know me, you didn't know Krause Publications, but you signed up. You signed up for $1,250. You also signed up for the ale auction for $1,250. Do you remember when you did that? Do you remember when you saw the ad or whatever? And what got you to spend $2,500 with us?
The last couple of years before I went there, I played in the AL Auction League with my ex-partner Kevin Deckel, and
Yep.
I did pretty good. I was always in the top of the standings. I was obviously paid more attention than most of them, but you have to those auctions. You kind of have to get it done during the auction. But there was trading, and the 2 years before that, I actually played in a mixed league. Somebody in Boston that I knew, and it was 14 or 15 team leagues. So I had a little bit of experience of a little deeper league, and I saw some of the problems. But that was a trading league as well. I pretty much went box to wire one year, and I scored like almost all the points, like 140 something out of 150, and I didn't really make any deals. I think it was the year Burley was a rookie. But anyway, so I decided before I saw your ad, I was said maybe I'll find something maybe to play a little bit more money, maybe $500. And I saw like a box score baseball in the Baseball Weekly or whatever the magazine was back then. And then the following week, I saw yours, and I was like, wow, that's in Las Vegas. I'm already booked to go that same week.
Yeah.
So I was like, it was, doing two leagues a little above what I was thinking about. So I asked my partner,
Yep.
or asked Kevin to be my partner. And he hadn't been doing baseball the last couple of years, but he would go to Vegas with me, and he kind of got fortunate the first year.
Yeah, for sure. So pretty cool. So nobody knew anybody's real name at that time. We had a message board, and you put your name on there on the message board. You were CCs Desperados. Talk about that name. What was CCs Desperados? You're still CCs Desperados, but talk about it when we had the message board and everyone knew you as that.
It was kind of interesting because before we went to there and I did pick a team, I told Kevin if we were going to be doing this, I said it was important to pick a team name that we kind of stuck with and you could identify with it over time. And I just kind of came along, kind of a wanderer, Cape Cod Desperado. So that's how I came around it. So the CC's Desperados is what I went with. And when actually Kevin and we separated, he was like, "Who gets the name?" I'm like, "Well, I'm the one that thought of it." And so eventually, we split ways, and believe it or not, Kevin is still a friend of mine, and he actually rents the apartment below my mother's house from me. So he's been there for 7 or 8 years, so I'm still friendly with him. He's a great guy, and but I was able to keep the team name, and I went on my way after like 2 seasons.
Yeah, people forget that you did have a partner those first couple of years, but you and Kevin were there in 2004, 2005. All right, so first year of NFBC, you and Kevin win your main event league title. You finish third overall. That was the year that Artie Rastelli and Aaron Seafelt were tied for first place with 2 days to go in the season. Really was one of our closest ones. I'm sure you remember that team. I'm sure you remember who you drafted and such. Were you close to winning that overall title as well with those guys? I don't remember those last 2 days.
Um, I did. I wasn't in. I kind of fell off pace a little bit at the beginning of September. If I would have matched Adi Rosselli in two pickups, and they were pitchers, it was I think it was Brett Tomko and Brandon Backey.
Hmm.
They pitched pretty well down the stretch. I think Tomko was the guy you had to pick up. If I would have kept him, matched him with that starter, I probably would have won the overall. Earlier in the season, I was kind of struggling for speed a little bit, and Coco Crisp got injured. And the news was I didn't, but believe it or not, the first 2 or 3 years, I never knew what Roto World was. I
Yeah.
didn't have news. I was in my car, 13 hours a day. So Kevin was my kind of my outlet to communication with the news and stuff. But anyways, so Chris, they thought he had a wrist injury and he's out for the season, and people cut him. And he was in my league, and I probably bid a couple $100 and I didn't get him. If I would have got him, that probably would have been a player I would have won with. And also, I had in the fourth round of the draft, believe it or not, I was on the clock and I thought saves were important. And Keith Falk was with Boston the first year, and Mariano Rivera were there. And I took Keith Falk. He had a good year. He had 32 saves, but Rivera had 21 more saves.
Yeah.
And I think that decision might have been enough. But, just to think back, back in time that you would take, that player, obviously
Yeah.
Rivera is a Hall of Famer and stuff like that. But I took a closer in the fourth round, in my first season.
Sounds good. All right. So you also won the AL auction that year, the $1,250 AL auction. So in Las Vegas, we only had 2 days. We had the AL auction and the NL auction on Friday at 4 o'clock. Meatloaf was in the NL auction. You were in the AL auction. Brady was the auctioneer. It was the first time he had ever done an auction. He was nervous. He was bad. I actually had to pull him aside and tell him to make sure to be on the gun, with the sold and such like that. You won that one. Do you remember that? And then we had the main event the next day at 10 a.m. Meatloaf was in that one as well in Las Vegas. Do you remember that time coming together and meeting people for the first time and such?
Yeah, it would. I mean, the first year you get there, it's really interesting. Everybody doesn't know anybody, all different
Yeah.
strategies, but there was this big kind of mystique of the leaderboard sports, and I think the thing that caught us off guard was the innings pitch right out of the gate. It was it 400 the first year?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
So these guys were doing these gimmick strategies and trying to
Yeah.
thing, and I guess even early on, I was pretty quick on picking up what was going on. Like these guys are doing something, whatever, and you could it would devalue starting pitching and stuff like that. So, but it didn't play into what I was doing. I think Perry Van Hook, I ended up beating him in the AL auction on the last day, and I think the difference in me and him winning was there was a makeup game or like a suspended game, and it was a couple innings that the stats kind of lagged. I
Yeah.
actually thought he beat me, but because of that other game, some of the stats didn't get thing, and I just narrowly beat him. And Perry Van Hook could have been a Hall
Yep.
of Famer if he'd have won that game. Then his whole history could have changed. But but anyways, they were good players. It was interesting, and it's just I don't remember who I got so much on the AL auction, but the first 7 players in the main event I can remember vividly. It was pretty interesting looking back at it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. It really was a great time. So, okay, first 3 years, you win a main event league title in 204, another one in 2005, win another one in 2007. You win 3 main event league titles in our first 4 years. You finished third, fifth, and third overall. What was the key to that early success? What were you doing differently? Again, we were only having one main event time, so you could only draft one time, and you won 3 out of 4 main event league titles.
I think the most important thing looking back on it is that when we first came to do the, play in the high stakes arena, I mean, it was really kind of pure. Nobody really knew where somebody was going. I guess some of the outside crowd played at ESPN or saw some maybe ADPs or Mock Draft Central was kind of present. But, I walked in the room. I had no idea what anybody liked or who it is. I did all my research. I had a idea what I was looking for. It worked the first year. The next year, you have a little more experience. You try to improve on your decision making, and ultimately, decision making is what makes you a better player. Even that somebody struggles is that they're not a bad player, is that they just need to improve their decision making when they're on the clock. And sometimes injuries happen and you're unlucky, but you made the right decision. But anyways, so I kind of knew what I needed to do, and I was kind of fortunate. The first 3 years in the NFBC, from June 15th to August 15th, I was in first every day of the week
Hmm.
from then. But in that third season, I remember talking to, was it Joe Thalen out of New York?
Hmm.
I was in the, like, way down the standings, and the 5 weeks after the season, I'm like, this team's going to make a run. He goes, what are you, nuts? You're like fourth in middle of 2 weeks into August, I was 15th overall, and I was pushing, and I was, in first in my league, but I lost Lariano, Messina, Papelbon, and Street, I believe, like within a week period, and I just couldn't fill the pitching staff. I doubled in guys and ate up my pitching, and I faded out away. But that year, I think I came in second in the ultimate. I
Hmm.
think I won the NL League because that was a Hanley Ramirez first season year, and he was a big guy. I think Kyle
Yeah.
Crawford and Hanley Ramirez were two guys that I think I was ahead of the field, maybe in speed, and those guys kind of fit the profile that I
Yeah.
was looking for, especially with it more of a hitting base required early in the NFBC.
So in the early years, you always talked about getting 75 homers and 75 stolen bases with your first three hitters. Usually were your first three picks back then as well. Talk about that strategy, and does it pertain today at all?
Yeah, if you can get it, accomplish it. Today it isn't the same because you can do it over the first 3 or 4 hitters, but it might be the first 6 rounds now because
Right.
now we used to take the pitchers starting pitcher in the fifth and maybe seventh round. At
Yeah.
the end of 10 rounds, you may have 2 pitchers and maybe take a closer. But early on, your closers were going a little bit higher, and they kind of eventually started drifting back, and now they're moving back up.
Yeah.
But the goal is to get the base of your categories with the least amount of picks. I think David DiDonato had won the overall in 2006. I think he was close to 100 with his first 3 picks.
Really?
I think he had Soriano, Vernon Wells, and one other player that had like almost 40 steals. I was thinking it was Beltran, but I looked it up earlier, and it wasn't him. But he nailed the first 3 picks.
Yeah.
So now what you try to do is you slip an ace in there, and the value of the hitters is so much better in the 5th and 6th round
Mhm.
these days. But my goal is to do that, but sometimes it's not as easy depending on your draft position.
Yeah, so talk about the first 3 or 4 picks today and how it has changed. I mean, you have no problem taking a starting pitcher right away, obviously, maybe even a couple. What's the trend going in fantasy baseball where, again, we used to talk about magazine writers will never, or industry writers will never take a starting pitcher in the first round. That's done, right?
I think that has changed a lot because in a lot of the people that were the writers and stuff that played in other leagues, and there was a lot of tied to trading leagues and
Yeah.
assets, and when those pitchers started getting 300 strikeouts and being really really impactful, it kind of changed the game. I think the Verlander Kershaw breakout, maybe that's when Lindy kind of picked was ahead of it. He doubled on the aces, and the ace thing has been around for a decade, and
Hmm.
Phil did really well, but he's not the first guy to do the aces, but he's the first guy that kind of get it right across the board.
Yeah.
And but when you're taking pitching though, if you take an early late, like last year in a 12-team league, I drafted Bauer and Bieber.
Yeah.
The year before they were awesome, and even they probably would have been okay if they pitched the whole season, but
Yep.
they one person gets hurt and the other one is knocked himself out of the league. So it's just kind of frustrating, and that's how the game is. I mean, I say it, you're gonna lose a lot more than you're gonna win, so you got to be careful. It's just part of the game, and you know, you you can have the right philosophy one year, and the next year you try to change it or change it up, and you're on the wrong path, and it just doesn't happen. And I also think that lately the players have been a little more inconsistent. Back when you took Vlad or Manny Ramirez, you kind of knew you were going to get a 300
Hmm.
hitter and stuff like that, and they kind of were close the next year. Now they can be such wide ranges at the early draft picks. Look at Bregman and some of those other players that have really slipped the last couple of years. Really
Right.
good for 2 years and then struggle.
Yeah, batting average can really go off the cliff there with the shifts and all that kind of stuff. You're right. So, all right. So you won another main event league title in 2009. You won 4 out of 6 years your main event league title, and you, like you said, you won an NL auction championship. I believe you won another AL auction. You did well in the ultimate. So by 2011, we put you in the Hall of Fame, and now in the last 10 years, you haven't had the same type of success. Did we put you in too early? You think or not?
In 2011, in a couple days before Labor, we had this discussion, and I told you not to put me in the Hall of Fame until I won the overall. So if you listen to me, I would not be in the
You
overall.
wouldn't be in right now. You haven't won an overall yet.
But I mean, I do think that on your decision for doing it, I was like a lot of people that play, I was willing to talk and on the message board, and I did have a little bit of presence, and it's all documented, obviously, still on your message board. And that message board from 2004 to 2009 was kind of a circus. You know, you had to babysit us a lot of years
Yes.
because we only had 1 or 2 leagues and nothing else to do, so we had a lot of free time.
Yep.
Once you gave us a lot more leagues to do, you got your life back. You know, we couldn't give you a hard time anymore. So
Yep.
it changed a lot. I think that life changed a little bit, and it's not in a bad way. I mean, obviously, I somehow I worked myself into a fantasy career,
Mhm.
and I do all the research, and it's not like I don't pay attention to it, but just the leagues and thing, and I really kind of I want to blame a lot of my downfall on Carlos Correa. You know what I mean? I've had him a lot. I
Yeah,
think
you do have a
after
love
last
affair.
year, I think he did okay for me last year based on his price point. But I think like in the high stakes things, I mean, he cost me like $30,000 over a few years in a row. You know, but when you think a guy's going to be a stud and you bank on him, and you get him in the after his first year, you get him early in a draft pick, and then he's a few rounds later. But he didn't end up being A-Rod. He did not steal bases, and maybe the next contract he gets, he ends up being a stud. But probably the only person will take him is somebody that's an Astros fan right now. But when you're on the wrong pony and stuff like that, and is a key player, I mean, it can go down, switch fast. I mean, but it's just it's I've been behind the scenes and won some money and held my own, and so I've broken even all but 2 or 3 years since I've been doing it at a minimum. But a lot of that doesn't get seen in the forefront because I do help some people in some side leagues
Yeah.
with my name not on it, and I've been fortunate to be able to be in some of those events. Thanks to
No, we made the right decision. You and Steve Japinko were trailblazers. I mean, again, we didn't wait the 10 years like MLB does for Hall of Famers. I was going to, that was my plan, but the two of you were so far ahead of the game at that time, and you both are still Hall of Famers for sure. It's great. It led to the growth of our game, in fact. So let's just talk a little bit about the last 10 years. Like you say, you've been writing, you're full time in this industry now. What in the game, though, has changed? Obviously, starting pitchers have changed. Obviously, innings pitched now in the last 3 years has changed. Stolen bases is tough. What has made the game more difficult? People say, Greg, you got to change your rules, change the innings pitched minimum, all that kind of stuff. No, that's for you guys to adjust, right? Not me. So, what has adjusted in the last 10 years in the game?
I think I pulled the information from when I was doing some of the this thing I do for SI score, that the medium for your 12-team event last year was only like 75 innings a team lower than the year before. So it was
Hmm.
still like 250 over. So everybody made it in the top half of it. So some of the
Yeah.
teams on the bottom half might not manage so well, not make it. So the innings obviously went down there. There's a few teams using the tamper and the openings and stuff like that. But it's also some of these arms that are younger need to develop to be aces and workhorse aces, and maybe the future of baseball, because the aces pitch so many innings, are going to require these big dollars. Is maybe we'll try to keep these guys under 200 so they don't get these elite numbers. And we
Hmm.
don't have to pay them as much. But the pitching side has changed a lot. The approach to drafting is changed a lot, especially in your event. You have drafting since October, so I always think
Right.
that the ADPs that come out early are going to be so much different in March. And I think the players that have been around since 2004 that maybe not draft so much, they can see, some of the pieces are a little more important to them in March. And that's where it changes a lot. And then you also throw in the mix of spring training. So a lot
Hmm.
changes from March 1st to the end of the month. And I think that's a big difference. But right now, you can look at the ADPs and get a feel for it.
Yeah.
I mean, to me personally, I feel is that reading draft boards and understanding what's going on is one of my strengths. I I get the players that I want, but sometimes they don't live up to expectations, and you have injuries. So I remember a couple of years ago, Phil was in my league, and he was like, you took Will Myers in the 4th round. I'm like, well, I had a plan that I was going to draft, and he was like a 2020 guy that I was going to take in the 6th. I didn't like my options, so I said I might as well get him out of the way. I was going to take a pitcher. I basically flipped a guy 2 rounds, and I knew my other pick was going to be like Yasiel Puig.
Hmm.
Well, Will Myers was a bust. Yasiel Puig was a bust. But what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But when you're making those decisions, it wasn't like I didn't know what I was doing. I made a decision for a reason. I wanted speed earlier and stuff like that. So, and I always think that even when you're on the clock these days, I mean, you really have to think about what you're going to do, because if you come into it and you have one draft
Hmm.
and you go sit there,
Yeah.
you can go down so many different paths. But if you've done a lot of drafts and you know a guy gets taken, you can detour and have, an idea of what you want to do if something changes. So there's a
Right.
lot more information. The drafts have changed. The players are a lot better. There's tons of more information. Twitter, there's connection to people.
Mhm.
The free agencies changed a lot. There's just a lot since, over the last decade.
Yeah, definitely. So now you write and have been for almost the last decade about every player. You research every player. It's part of your job, obviously. But do you think that you overthink maybe sometimes with all the information you have now? You used to use your eye a lot more as a baseball fan. Do you think you overthink or not? You just know more now.
Um, the, this is the problem. There's two problems here. Is that um, I don't usually want to draft early because I noticed a few years ago when I was doing drafting early, even the players that do it now, it's January. I mean, nothing's going on now, so players' values really aren't going to change with nobody signing or
Mhm.
there's no player new, there's nothing going on. But it is so easy to do drafts and get pigeonholed. You want this guy, you're going to move this guy up. You're taking this, different players at different areas in the draft. So you can actually create inflation of your own player by moving them up a half round here and there because you want them. But you get like I want that guy, and then it comes in March. You want these players, so you get kind of who you want. But I think sometimes I forget stuff that I write. If I read my own writing, I wouldn't make these mistakes. But there's so much information from doing the Baltimore Orioles the first week in January and the last team in 6 weeks later. I mean, I probably write 5,000 words a team, of information, but I use that writing to do projections, so I have a feel what's going on. But it's a lot to take in. Baseball is so much information, and
Yeah.
before it was just pick up the Chandler book and be looking for some key indicators that you want, and see what everybody else feels about the inventory. But it's changed a lot for me, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. All right. We never really talked about this, but in 2010, you actually helped Jesse and Dustin start up the World Championship of Fantasy Baseball. Was a competitor towards me, but you know, there, this is a big space. There's no problem having competitors. But actually, what it did for me, Shawn, was it actually made me say, I need to have 12 team leagues and 10 team leagues and more leagues so that if I do have competitors, I'm at least the longest running one or the best one out there and such. And so you started this 14 team league. Kind of talk about why you did that. I mean, Jesse and Dustin had a big football company, so it made sense to do baseball. But and again, it made me better, I think, because it made me create more games and have a more wide portfolio. But it was an interesting time in 2010. We certainly are friends. It was no big deal to have a competitor, but it didn't work for them.
Yeah, it was they had the football event, and
Hmm.
at that time, from the background of where they were going and stuff, they obviously wanted to push the world championship a lot higher, get TV involved and stuff like that. And then the housing market and the strike from 2008 to 2011, kind of got in the way. But so they had, asked me about baseball. So when I was looking at it, obviously I'm playing, fantasy baseball, and you have your game, and I don't want to do the same thing that you did. So I just thought of things that I thought would make the game different, but it improve things that I thought might help owners in a different way that you have it. So, you know, ideally was in a 14 team league, I think it was 32 men roster. So I think your player pool was 450 we use now for the
Yeah.
15 teamer, and that was 452. So 14 team is about the same player pool, but it was biweekly moves for pitches as well. And the argument, I mean, your side, I know your stance on it, and people are, talk about this on the message board a lot, especially with now with COVID, it's more of a factor. The bottom line with any fantasy daily or whatever, people don't want to have zeros, and I knew that
Hmm.
a decade ago. You'd want somebody gets hurt during the week, you'd like to get them out of there. If pitcher, they're supposed to start on Thursday, they push them to something other day, and get scratched, you get a zero. And you kind of like frustrated. How am I getting a zero? And we used to have the DL thing way
Hmm.
back in the day that people used that, and some people hated it because they didn't know about it, and some people used it to their advantage to buy a day or two to get more information. I don't think that it was a big edge back then, but I thought that if you could use pitching in comparison to your league, is that later in the season, the best NFBC players, if they manage all year, they're going to be able to get their pitching stats, and they're not going to get run down in wins and strikeouts in September when it's kind of squirrely and people are doubling up. So in your format, the leagues can kind of have bigger swings because people are willing to. They don't care. I'll pick up any double starter. I'll beat up my ERA and WHIP. and it
Mhm.
might help them, but it might also help other teams come into play. So that was a big factor back then. I think early on, like not having the lock as the first game at 1 o'clock was
Mhm.
important. I think, and you progressed off of that too. I think did that. Even now, I think that if you could have your pitching not lock until the pitcher pitches and give that person the flexibility to move it, it would improve the game.
Yeah.
You don't have to get bye week moves, but that at least gives you 2 or 3 days. And if you ever somebody pitches in your bench, obviously you can't get them in. So you're going to have a roster structure where you're not going to get a player in when you get scratched a lot,
Mhm.
but it also gives a little bit of a window to improve the game. So I think back then was try to get something different. It was supposed to be smaller. They pressed a little above
Mhm.
where they were. The game made sense, and it still would make sense today if somebody wanted to do it. But it's just not out there. The NFBC fills all the needs for everybody. Like you said, you added the 12 teams. It's just these little differences of the game that some people, would like to see different and other people's not. I mean, you have discussions in your message board a lot, and we
Mhm.
have Masato and those guys complain about the 163rd game, but that's a different argument. But
Mhm.
this stuff, what's right or wrong, it's just, you've had a history of your game, and we've been playing by the same rules, so does that really make sense to do a major change in any format like that? Maybe just like I said, that little tweak for
Yep.
pitching in week or something like that. But that was the idea, just to be a little different. They were looking for it. I mean,
Yeah.
realistically, I thought there were good rules, and it just didn't materialize. Even I
Yeah.
think the other football event tried to run it 1 year.
Yeah.
It did.
They did.
What it did was is give the baseball players a huge advantage for the pitching side over the football players that wanted to do it for the first
Mhm.
time because they couldn't manage the pitching staff well enough. But
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well,
but that's that story.
yeah, no, and it all makes sense for sure. And we didn't have the software at that time at Stats to do some of the things that we're able to do now. So everything needs to progress. I think the pitching is a good idea. That's something I could talk with our software about. And we've always talked about that. If a guy misses it and gets a zero, we don't want you to have a zero on the pitchers either. The software just has to be able to know that he hasn't pitched yet, and you could move him out before he was going to pitch or something. So
Can I
we
ask
can
you a
always talk
question?
about that.
Can I
Huh?
ask you a question?
Sure.
Because I did that, right? You added these other games and you expanded your base model. So
Yep.
in a way, I haven't received my commission check.
You have not. You are a competitor of mine. I'm never giving you any money. No,
Yeah.
it actually did make me stand up, and that's what I said was I am going to create games that nobody else is coming in this space again. And if they are, I'm already there and they can copy my rules. So it did help me. Let's talk about an edge that players have, and that's called fab. I mean, you have to grind to do free agency every Sunday night during the summer and all that kind of stuff. That's one of your specialties. I think Japinka, that's one of his specialties. You guys are grinders. You find these guys. Talk about what it takes to be a grinder in the fab all your 27 weeks of the season for baseball and why you are able to be so good at it.
I think the first thing that has to happen for be successful at Fab, you really have to avoid some injuries to have flexibility on your bench. Or even, if you get saves wrong, if you get saves wrong at the draft, early in the season, you're going to commit extra roster spots to closer and waiting. So I think avoiding injuries and getting your bullpen right kind of saves some of that stuff. But I always think on when you're picking up on the waiver wire, there's a market value, a must get value, and a token. I'll give them a shot value to keep everybody honest if you kind of need them. And sometimes that get honest price point, you fall into players that really help you. But there's also times that you're like, man, I didn't really have the team need, but next week I lost my first baseman. I should have got him last
Mhm.
week. But the most important is market value, I think, for most people. And the new players, it's harder for them to gauge. And it's really from experience. And even you, if I'm in a league with, any veteran player or stuff like that, I might have a read on what style of play they play and what they're looking for. And I can get reads off of, past fab values. But so you find out what the market value is, and it may be $89. But so you decide, is that what you want to pay, or you want to go over that? So,
Mhm.
and then I lost my closer. Do I want to go 230? And I think that's the biggest trap is when they're those high dollar save guys go. It's the percentage of them having success is kind of short. But I mean, I've
Right.
seen the Hyperlink guy. Have a couple holes at the beginning of the year, and he blasts the first closer that got the job. He gets 35 saves, and that really helps him in a lot of leagues.
Yep.
So that's what happens when you cheat saves. You have to be a little more aggressive. So,
Yeah.
I think it's those three price points that you need to know.
Yeah, we were talking with Phil DeSalt, who won the NFBC Main Event in the auction championship. His strategy was to get those two closers in rounds 4 and 5. Obviously, Rosenthal got hurt after he drafted him, but he wants to get those guys so he doesn't have to go after them on Fab, right? He doesn't want to spend that the first couple weeks on Fab for a new closer. Where he did very well last year was he got that whole starting rotation and he didn't have to go after Fab, and he used his Fab to get that second closer. I mean, obviously, that's what it's all about with draft. You want to fill all the holes so you don't have to dive in there in big money in weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 in Fab, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and I knew that in 2004 that actually that it was like that's why I took a close in the fourth round. Is like I
Mhm.
knew they were going to be expensive, and if I got that category taken care of, but
Right.
as you play and the pitching's a little bit different, and the player flows, then you try to cheat, and then that 12th, 13th round, or that gets really kind of where you get the second closer or pretty good upside arm, so it changes a
Yeah.
lot. So cheating, I can see the positive, but I prefer, I wouldn't, say that I want to take, two closes in the first 5 rounds, but I saw the value 2 years ago. I took Josh Hader in a lot of leagues. I saw,
Hmm.
he could be like considered, a half of an ace,
Right.
but it makes sense, but these players still have to produce what you expect.
Yeah. So at the start of the year, what are you looking at to get ready for drafts? Are you looking at category targets? You know what you need to get 80% in each of the 10 categories, 90%. Is that a big focal point for you? I know you're doing the player analysis, but talk about the rotisserie side of it, those 10 categories. How are you attacking them?
Yeah, I've always had the targets for the 15
Hmm.
team. I probably have since the beginning of your time. I have the I had one article that I had everything for, probably 15 years. I probably got lazy the last couple of years, but I have it in some sort of spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And I've already this year I pulled all your events, and I know what the target thing. And a lot of times I gravitate towards a 12 because it's more of I'm writing more to the public, so that I use
Hmm.
that as a baseline when I'm using it.
So are you
Um,
looking at the 80%, 90%? What are you looking at?
Yeah, yeah. 80% is where I think that 80% is the goal, and
Yeah.
you have to probably beat like 3 categories minimum. And
Okay.
probably these days, some of these guys that won have done maybe 5 categories. But
Yeah. Right.
ideally, you would think that if you were really high up in 3 categories and you got the other, seven at 80%, you would be competitive.
Okay. Yeah.
And ideally, one of these years that somebody is going to win the overall with like 85%, it's going to be a lot closer, it'll be a nail biter for a lot more teams. But
Yeah.
right, last year, Phil ran away with it. He dominated, and but it's the pitching side. If he locks that stuffs up on, there's not a lot of fluctuation late in the year.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about auctions because that's a different beast altogether. You and I have worked together in labor. You've been my partner, AL and NL. We won the NL 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know if we're going to be in labor this year. I don't think so. We'll see. They're going to try to do it live. If not, if they do it online, we'll be back, but I don't think we'll be doing it live. But let's talk about auctions if we can. You're a stars and scrubs guy. You probably always have. Talk about that strategy where you want to get the top guys and then you feel confident enough to be able to fill in the roster after that.
Yeah, it's the same premise of, I guess, of the 75-75. You want to get, I was always looking for, that 300 guy that could be like a 30-00,
Mhm.
Kyle Crawford type player that could steal bases, or even Trey Turner, and then kind of like a 20-20 guy, try to get a balanced skill set in the AL, especially in the AL auction league. And then, try to get a decent front, ace. But the problem with the pitching, I think, from say 10 years ago, when I think I only finished in fourth. First 8 to 9 years, I cashed most of the time in the AL auction league, and I was definitely better at that than the National League. I cashed once in the 5 tries, and I won it that year. So I think I was okay. But the only reason I won that year was because I sat Oliver Perez in September, and he didn't pitch in my ERA whip. I gained 6 points. But anyway, so I think that the price of the pitching in the single line things have gone up a lot. So it's kind of really been a lot more difficult because I think one year that I was competing against Eddie Gillis, the year before he had won the league, I had Kyle Crawford and Vlad get hurt in September, and was it Milton Bradley, the first base coach, did something. So I had 3 players get knocked out in September, and I lost by like 2 runs, and he finessed Whip by like 2 points. But he said to me something and like about it that year, and I said, you know what? Next year I'm gonna have money the whole year, and I'm gonna fight you all the way. It was the greatest. If you were watching that, that was the greatest auction ever because I sat in seat 10, he sat in seat 3, and he had Lance sitting next to him, and I made it frustrating for him the whole day. And I came out of that auction. I said, "You ain't winning whipper ERA this year. And he goes, and then he gets back and he goes, "Did you remember the elephant in the room?" I said, "Yep." And he didn't win. I won the league and I going away. But he had to get Zach Greinke for $18 or something like that. Instead, he didn't get him, and they end up getting like 3 or 4, pitchers that got hurt. But it was, those are great experiences and great memories. But I think like back then you could get, Zach Greinke, David Price for $18. Now they go 28. So,
Yeah.
you have to give away some money. So if for me being aggressive, and I kind of call it being a, kind of a cowboy, when I'm being aggressive, I could be compromising my back end a little bit. I'm good at the back end. It's just, can I get the right pieces in the middle for the right price? And I think that's been kind of difficult lately in the auctions. I think it works a little bit better in your high dollar mixed leagues though, because the talent pool kind of lasts
Right.
a long time. You get really good players for $2 or $3. You can get 20-80 players, and if you got the right structure, it works. But you still
Right.
have to get the pitching right.
Yeah, well, you and Eddie I think you have the most titles in the AL only auctions. I think each have 4 or 5. So you guys have gone head to head for an awful lot for sure. Hey, so you analyzed Phil Dussault's team for SI.com and you posted on our message boards as well. What did you learn from Phil's team other than he nailed the starting pitching? What strategy or what did he do last year that got him to win the overall and dominate?
He was, I know going in from seeing the year before, and the year before he had success in that sprint season, taking that lead ace. And he talked about it on your first video, that he thought the pitching, having the ace would be helpful. And he was right. You got that base, and, he can fluctuate, rotate some hitters in and kind of get some stuff. But, he went in, got the front ace, DeGrom, he got hurt, but he really kind of got those other pitchers to complementary. And there was a nucleus of a few arms, like Musgrove and Gossman that were identifiable, but, I didn't end up with them. I guess I'm a little more leery on like a Gossman, know he pitched better, but, you go into San Francisco, yeah, I think he's going to be better, but, you got all that, AL East thing. So this year, those guys that had Gossman, they're going to draft him and I won't own him again and they might get paid back. But anyway, but he got the pitching staff right. The basis of it. He whiffed on the closer Rosenthal, which you say a 5th-round pick, that's pretty major. But if it was a 5th-round ace or a lead bat, that might have been a lot harder to replace. You can find some saves. He might have hit in the first week, got a $2 closer. They got him 30 saves, and he would have saved the season. So it wasn't the worst thing to happen to him. But it also, him getting hurt and being out for the season did clear a roster spot. But on the hitting side, he basically took all veteran bats. They kind of had 500 at bats. He only had 2 major problems, and he was able to fill one with Votto, and I think the other one was Cesar Hernandez covered McNeil from the Mets. So he filled his 2 kind of slots. So he kind of got all the hitting right except for the catchers, and he just kind of rotated them in, and he got some back end catching stats. He got close to 15 home runs and 50 RBIs, and that's probably right into the mode of like a Ken Magner. Two catchers, and you want to get 30, 100 out of them, which sometimes is really, really difficult, especially when you're surfing the catcher pool. And then on the waiver wire, what did he have to find? He had to find catchers and closers and waitings, and he had to make a couple of Votto kind of somebody dropped him. I don't think anybody picked him up the following week from what I wrote, and I think the next week he got him for $28, and he basically was kind of like a Barry Bonds, 28.76 for 280 something at bats at 270, monster season. But he had great, he managed the team really well when guys were getting cold. He sat him down. He had Brian Reynolds in the first half of the year. He had a decent lineup, and he was able to sit him here and there. And when he got hot, he had him in the lineup. So he did a really, really good job managing his hitters. He didn't have to compromise his bench too much. He didn't really, when he maybe had DeGrom hurt, he didn't allow a lot of injured players where, he had, only 3 players extra he can use. So, if you got 1 or 2, you can get away with it, especially if they're not long-term or injury. So he did a really, really good job with the closers, and he didn't really have to spend a ton. And when he needed to get somebody, he had the right price points. Like he said, he has more experience of getting the players, and a lot of those play. And when you look back at that league, and I really didn't kind of go back on it. There was 4 other teams I think that scored over 100 points in that league, but on the downside, there was like 5 teams that were kind of really kind of poor. So so were they less competitive, or did they fall out early, or did he run away with it and that make him less interested? So that always happens, and that's part of playing in the event. He dominated at the draft, and he when he needed pieces in the waiver wire, they were there. So he did the game. I have actually all of his other, big dollar things, his drafts, and I just haven't got side by side to get a look of, how many of these pitchers, because if he likes a core of pitchers, he's going to like them in all the leagues. So if he
Yep.
gets, if he liked 10 guys and he got 5 or 6 in a lot of leagues, their pitching staff's going to be kind of competitive, and he's going to use the same kind of style that he did. And even on the waiver wire, he's kind of shopping for the same kind of players. So it all comes together. He got the draft right in all these leagues, and he had a great season. And he's the best player in Canada right as of now. Right?
There you go. And
Actually, he's in the U.S. too, so I just shouldn't be saying that.
you got a Canadian to lead him too, that Joey Votto. But okay, so he won 17 out of 22 leagues. He cashed in all 22 leagues. I mean, it has to be one of the greatest seasons, if not the greatest season in NFBC history. I think it is. Has he figured it out? Does he have the keys to the code? I had one veteran tell Tom, "I don't even know if I'm going to play. He's got it all figured out." Come on, we all thought you had it figured out, or Steve had it figured out, or Lindy had it figured out, right?
I heard his comment at the end of the last thing where he said he wanted to keep his win rate at 50%. Unfortunately, I've been in long enough. This game's kind of humbling.
Yep.
And, when he's going to be a lead ace guy and rely on early pitching, there's going to be years that some of these guys are going to get hurt. And it might not be an elbow issue. It could be some, line drive back of the thing. Things happen. And if he doesn't get that ace, one of his first 2 get hurt, and he doesn't, last year he had the incredible depth. But if that doesn't happen, that team, he's going to have a lot of work. And sometimes the outs aren't there on the waiver wire, and then you have to spend more money. So, I mean, I think that he's got a good idea what he wants to do. It's been successful, and I think that it can be repeatable, but there will be times where, it just doesn't break right. Or he's in a draft that he wanted this pitcher in the 4th round, and somebody takes him before it, and he takes the next guy, and that guy doesn't do what he's supposed to. But it all happens to us. I mean, Jabinker, I think Jabinker has probably the best interpreter of information that I know. He is really good at, understanding it. And the difference between him and me is he's more of a stat guy. So he doesn't really watch it. And I'm more of like a scout stat, number guy. So, he will take that Stephen Wright that gets that 8 starts for Boston and pitches really well and ride him out, where I'm like, oh, that guy's, going to get blasted sooner or later. I'm not going to get that guy. So,
yeah.
But he had the longest run out of, me, that he really continued to not have the clunker season type of thing, or have the, thing. But, the last couple of years he's had his fair share, but he still wins,
Yeah.
But, Steve's problem is the last few years is his real job has gotten in the way of life for me, And
That's his fault. He should just retire. He's old enough. He can retire. His kids are all grown up. Come on.
Wants to get out of college. But I used to talk to that guy. I used to be on the road 65 hours a week. I talked to that guy every day of the week, Monday through Friday when I was driving. And but I'm lucky. I talked to him like 3 times in the football season.
Well, talk about the community aspect, because it is unreal, and you're at the top of the list there. You talk to so many people on the phone. I know you do every day. Some of your best friends are now NFBC people, right? I mean, talk about the high stakes community, because I never envisioned this, that's for sure. But I look forward to going to Vegas and New York twice a year as much as anybody. I love seeing all you guys, and it's great. Talk about that aspect of what we got going here.
It absolutely was the best part of the game. You get to meet all these people that had similar passions.
Yeah.
You're competing against, and you're trying to win. They win one year, you win the next year, and you just meet these incredible friends all across the country. I mean, like you said, you have these. I mean, the people I talk to on the phone are people in the NFBC, or across the country, or that play football. I have Jeff Dawson back home, but he has interest in the same thing. But I mean, you have other friends that think, but they don't. If you're in a home league and you do Yahoo and stuff like that, or the NFBC, that person can't have the same conversation that we can. It's just a different level. And I think that just knowing everybody, and it's gotten where there's almost like there's different pockets, because the first I've known you since the first year, and I think I was one of the first people that stayed longer and hung out with you, and the group of KJ and John Statmuller and stuff like that we all hung out together, and we're there and talking who's going to be around. There's a lot more pockets of those now, and maybe one a couple of them even popped up from Twitter. So but they're all every one of those groups, or whoever you're friends with, it's always a great experience. You're bouncing stuff off, you talk to them. I know that I don't talk as much. I guess I don't rely on other people as far as the free agency stuff as some other people, and maybe I don't have a time. Once in a while, I talk to Eddie. I'll ask a question, or
Hmm.
I might say something to him. But usually I might be in a high dollar league with Eddie where I wouldn't want to have a conversation. I'm helping Jim Ferrari or something, and he's like last year helping Andy Robinson.
Yeah.
So I can't talk to him about fab and anything. So. But so like I said, I talk to Eddie Gillis maybe once every couple of weeks. He lives an hour and 40 minutes. I called David Donato, probably a couple of months ago, check up on him. He doesn't play it, but he loves it and stuff like that. And he's 1 year overall. I'm sure
Hmm.
life gets in the way a little bit. He pauses, but I'm sure he'll be back. I think he got all juiced up after talking to me, so I think he's going to Vegas this year.
Good, good.
But it's just great, I mean, like I said, I've met some incredible people, and people a lot smarter than me, and I'm kind of like the bottom tier guy getting to play with some real life stars, but it's still kind of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Talk a little bit about the difference between baseball and football. Then, I mean, I know you're active in football as well. You partner with other people, but fantasy baseball is like a marathon. I always said, and fantasy football is like a 100-yard dash. Now, football is a little bit longer again, but talk about the two differences between those sports in the fantasy high stakes area.
Um, all right, so baseball is like you're climbing a mountain, and if you're climbing the mountain, you're near the top. There's a good chance you might be able to find some pieces if you stumble and go down a couple steps late in the year. But if you get out of the gate, you're going to kind of struggle. Football is more of it's an event. It's a lot more fun. It's really a sprint. It's really reliant of your star players, living up to the expectations. And I hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, there's so many injuries in football. I don't want to do it." But you watch the Chads and some of the other players that are really put a lot of effort in it. They put in a lot of teams, and they do well year in, year out, and they're trying to position themselves so they can win an overall. But they still have to. You can't put in $50,000 and get cleaned up year after year. I mean,
Yep.
you're out of the game. So so it's just it's a pretty good experience. I think that in football, I'm probably a lot better than I was 10 years ago, and probably don't get the notice because I'm not in many leagues with my own name on it.
Hmm.
But because I do projections, and I have to look at every detail and research every football team, and I know if their offensive line kind of struggles, and just taking in all this information, it helps me at least put the structure it right. But it's still football. The players have to do what I mean. If you drafted the Atlanta receiver Ridley this year,
Yep.
the player doing pretty well and just decides to take his ball and go home. What are you going to do? So it's you can be a lot more impactful if that stuff happens. In baseball, you might be able to find you lose a 20-80 hitter, you can find a guy to get 15,
Yeah.
75 and bridge it. But it's a managing wise, baseball is definitely a different breed. Football, yeah, I could say in a home league a description, a guy that just show up the draft with a piece of paper and draft in a 12-team league, he still can win it,
Yeah.
and he still could
Definitely.
get be in the right draft spot and makes 3 or 4 great picks, and he can still win a league. But we're in baseball, you can't do that. So that's a different
Yeah.
part of the game, and especially the waiver wire is so intense, and you have to really kind of know the market value.
Yeah, definitely. Two different games for sure. All right. For any advice for people who are thinking about trying out the NFBC, how should they get involved? How would you dive in if you were coming in right now? You're in your 19th year. How can they compete against you, for crying out loud?
Baseball and fantasy sports, is bottom line is it's all about opinion, right? And we're going there to bet our opinion. We're gonna kind of do some research and stuff like that. So I think that anybody that is even thinking about it has followed fantasy baseball or even fantasy football. They have an idea who they like and what they like, and they have an opinion of a player. The difference is putting improving your decision making in the drafts and having it all come together and picking a style that you want to like. So I use this as a reference. We've been to the Vegas, and we've bet on the dogs or the horses a lot. And if I'm going to be a person that bets on the the horses or the dogs that get out of the box quickly, I'm going to win my fair share of races. If I'm going to bet the class horses, I'm going to win my fair share. If I'm going to pick the closers, I'm going to win there. It's all picking a style that you think that you can win with, that kind of fits your game. Maybe sometimes people don't have as much time in the waiver wire, so they want to be more pitching strong, because then they don't have to deal with the pitching so much. But picking the style that you want, that you think can win, or even you've seen Phil or somebody have success. Look what they did, and see how they did it, and can I do something similar to that? And if I do fail, why did I fail? But, pick a style that fits what you want, and then, go from there. And I will add this just for, I know that, Masato's on a lot of stuff and talks, and they have these things, but, I know he wants to beat up a lot of people, but I think to really kind of get to the next level is when you're doing a draft and you're seeing somebody doing something and you're like, oh, that guy's got a terrible team. Like, you got to really understand what they're doing in the team build. I mean, Jim Stannard,
Mhm.
Larry Schechter, and there was one other name I was thinking about. These guys, they value catchers different than us, and they got a different style, and they have success, and they play the game a little different. Or, then sometimes these people, they tried a few years back, see, can we punt power and try to do it? They can do it. You look at Statmuller, gets in the high dollar league, everybody taking pitches, and he's loading up an offense, and he just says, all right, I'm going to just try to wins and strikeouts. And if I fall in the middle in the ERA, I
Mhm.
did great. If I did worse, maybe I come in fourth. But if he aces the hit and gets 70 points, I want to be competitive. But a lot of people don't kind of, they just kind of see the straight line balanced attack. And you really got to read what somebody's doing and understand what some of these, styles of people are doing. And probably more importantly in drafts is that you need to know who is on the same page with you on some players.
Mhm.
And then if you know who's on the same page, sometimes you just can't give them 2 picks to your 1. You have
Yeah.
to take that player in front of them and don't give them 2 in a corner and take them in advance. But, if you're doing that, that player has to be, you have to get that player right. But if it's kind of important to you. So that's just some of the things, I think about or whatever. And I
Yep.
obviously am different than most on some of that stuff.
All right, couple of real quick ones. Who's your number one pick this year if you had the number one pick?
It's Soto. I
Is it?
mean,
Mm,
yeah, I mean, it's just, I think that I can get out in the speed in the next round. I think I can get out in the pitching in the next round. I mean, I would like Washington to have a better supporting cast. I
mhm,
understand the upside of Tatis has by far the highest ceiling of all of them, because he could be the 40-40 guy, and he puts the ball in play, he hits for a massive contact batting average. So his batting average would be helpful. It's just, will he stay healthy? And, shortstop's, decent. But he is the person. Soto's just, to me, is like that. He's not Albert Pujols because but that type of player. I mean, Pujols
yeah,
still, some bases, and I think
yep,
Soto's still young enough where he can get it. So I think I would take him overall first. I did it last year. I think I was right. He didn't do it, and I did get
yeah,
Tatis. But if I picked in the back last year, I probably would have won. If I was like pick 10, I would have probably ended up with Vlad. I had a great friend, Vlad. I just didn't take him from the front. But I
yeah,
could have had a Scherzer and Vlad and whoever else
yep.
in the third round. I've been off to the races. But
Well,
I think
all right. So if you have your choice of where you could draft, where would you want to this year? More on the
I
player
haven't
pool.
really thought about it that much. Typically, if I'm doing like 2 or 3 main events and I get an early pick, the next one I'll try to move to like 10, 11, or
Right.
12 with some player and get to the other side. But sometimes if I like the draft that came out, I just let it flow. Most of the time, I don't try to go, I like the first 3 players, then I'm going to drop, because if I think sometimes you get in a draft and you're picking like 8th, like I think the year that Dave Potts won, did Miguel Cabrera, was like a first or second pick. He slid to 5th.
Hmm.
If he would have moved out of that spot, he wouldn't have got him. And that was the year Cassavetes was in pick 1. He kind of changed the whole flow right out of the gate by picking somebody different. And
Hmm.
then people were thinking of another player. And then Dave Potts wins 100,000. So I don't like, so you just never know which player might slide. But
Yeah.
there is this year, there's going to be some dynamic teams that get picked from the back end, especially if some of the ADPs you have early, hold up for, as we get into March. But
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting, and then there's going to be some exciting team builds, you know.
Yep. Definitely. All right. What do you prediction for the lockout?
And I can't imagine them, kind of
Yeah.
pushing the season back. There's just too much on the line. I don't follow it as close. I don't turn the TV that much. I'm just kind of my head down and doing whatever. But I think there's so much on the line. They just got to get it done. The COVID's not helping.
Yeah.
It just would be a big negative to the game, I think. And the players need money. They even saw some of the contracts have stepped back a little bit, and it's changed. So I think they get it done. I think we start on time.
Yep.
If they don't, I'm still going to Vegas the same time, and I don't know. We'll see what happens on the draft. But
Me too.
I'm flying in on March 22nd. I don't have a return date, but I'm getting out of the north east
I'm with you. I'll be there on the 21st, so we'll have some fun. Sweet 16 that weekend in Las Vegas. We're at the Bellagio. Can't wait. All right, last question here. What's your goals for this year in the NFBC?
My goals in the NFBC. I guess the first goal would be stay healthy. I want my players to stay healthy.
You, not your players, your goals. You going to win it this year or not?
Am I going to win it right now? Like, can I talk to Phil offline or something?
No.
No. Am I going to win the overall? Well, that'd be pretty much. I mean, I think in one of those years in 2007, 2008, I started to write the whole document. I think I documented the whole season, but I came in 58th overall that year. But I had high expectations of winning it and have it documented, but it didn't happen. So I think that the class of players is pretty competitive. Getting in the right draft and getting the right draft spot is kind of important, but not to say that I care if I'm in any league with anybody, I don't really care about that because ultimately, I get to make a decision when it's my turn and I know what's going on. So, but for you, and we're on the air and recording, I will win the overall. So you're off the hook.
There you go. It's recorded right here on our YouTube channel. I love it. All right, Shawn, it was a lot of fun talking with you. Thank you very much. Bowl well tomorrow then, all right?
Yeah, I'll hope to strike out. We got a big match. Last week, the team shot 3,500.
That sounds like a lot.
They 700 a man for
700, yeah.
For every guy, and we got to bowl them this week.
All right. Well, good luck, and I will see you in Vegas March 22nd then, all right?
All right, good talking to you. Thanks for having me on. And I do have a voice, and I'm usually hidden behind the computer, but thanks for getting me out in the public.
Good to see you again. All right, thanks much.
All right.
Talk to you all later. Bye.